Hello, my name is Jayne MacLean, coordinator of the Alternative Farming Systems Information Center at the National Agricultural Library. Today, December 5th, 1990, I want to introduce you to Dr. J. Patrick Madden, who is presently acting director of USDA's LISA program. That's the Low Input Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. I first met Patrick almost 10 years ago during a visit to the Rodale Research Center. As a professor of agricultural economics at Pennsylvania State University, he was engaged in a research collaboration with the center. My visit was as part of the USDA Organic Farming Committee, headed by Dr. Garth Youngberg, on a tour hosted by Robert Rodale. Both before and since that time, Dr. Madden has been a clear and compelling voice for organic, alternative, and sustainable agriculture. In 1987, he was called in by the Department of Agriculture to help develop the LISA program, and he has been a driving force for it ever since. He was the first director, working with Paul O'Connell of CSRS and Dixon Hubbard and others in the Cooperative Extension Service. After a hiatus, he is now again serving as acting director. His conviction, energy, and powers of persuasion and organizational skills have indeed been keys to the program's success and have hastened the acceptance by farmers and others of the concepts of sustainable agriculture. Jane Gates, assistant coordinator of the Information Center, will interview Dr. Madden and ask about the influences in his life that started his interesting career on its way, and about his current activities and visions for the future.
Patrick, Dr. James Patrick Madden, it's a pleasure to have you here at the National Agricultural Library.
Good to be here, Jane.
And we were reminiscing before the cameras started to roll about the first time we met, and agreed that it was in California at a conference at Solomar. And I was not only privileged to hear you talking then, I was able to give you a lift to the airport, which was one of the fun times for me. But it's a privilege also to have you here today. And thank you for agreeing to talk on the record.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I'd like you to start out by talking a little bit about your background, about your training. I know you were born and raised in Oregon.
Right. I was born in a little town of Merrill, right on the California border, raised on a farm near Milan, also a very tiny community. Graduating class of 21.
Oh, that is small.
Yeah, really small. And then went to Oregon State for a bachelor's and to Iowa State for a PhD in agricultural economics, both degrees. And then from there to Puerto Rico. First job out of grad school was at University of Puerto Rico, and then was called into Washington to conduct a national study on economies of farm size. I spent 4 years in Washington in various positions, and ended up at the I was on the staff of the National Advisory Commission on Rural Poverty under President Johnson. That was kind of a turning point in my career. At that point, then I decided I wanted to leave government and get to a university. So I went to Penn State in '67 and was there 20 years.
Was there any particular reason you chose Penn State?
Well, I was looking for an institution that would pay me to do what I really wanted to do.
And Penn State agreed to do that.
And Penn State wanted someone who would do policy research, and particularly with emphasis on poverty, poverty programs, poverty analysis. I started a new course at Penn State, Poverty Analysis, People and Programs, which I co-taught with a social psychologist, Bill Smith, an interdisciplinary team effort in which we had 2 professors always present in the classroom. And I did a lot of research. My motivation was that I felt that public policy was badly served by lack of information. Kind of if we do this, then this is going to be the outcome. That the legislators and the people who ran the programs simply were doing the best they could with the information they had, but I felt that they were hampered by lack of understanding of what could happen, and what the implications of different policy changes and so forth. So I was motivated to improve that policy process through research and educational effort that would illumine the whole causal connection.
Mm-hmm.
So, and at that time, my main emphasis was on poverty. I was concerned about the deprivation, worldwide, but at that point, domestic United States situation. I helped produce a report called "The People Left Behind."
I was going to ask you about that because in looking here for your writings, I didn't come across that particular one. The People Left Behind refers to...
Yeah, that was the report of the National Advisory Commission on Rural Poverty.
And those are the people left behind, the rural poor?
The rural poor,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And the whole idea that the rest of society is becoming more affluent, and many of the disenfranchised and marginalized people were simply not participating in the affluence of that time. Excuse me. Working with Bill Smith, I came to understand a lot of the social, psychological, and institutional underpinnings of deprivation, and did a number of policy studies, program evaluations, and so forth, dealing with rural poverty, and then moved from there into rural development. I see you have here some of the publications I did during
yes, this one is
era.
A rather large tome called Rural Development in the Land-Grant University, an evaluation of Title V. This is the one you referred to earlier.
Right. What we did in that study is look at what was going on in all of the land-grant university institutions regarding rural development work that was being done under the auspices of Title V, the Rural Development Act. We did case studies, we did site visits a number of places in the country, and that too was kind of a turning point in its own way, in that I really came to have an appreciation for the strengths and the weaknesses of the land-grant university system. I gained a great deal of respect for some really innovative, imaginative, creative, energetic work that was going on in a number of the institutions, and at the same time understanding a number of the barriers that prohibited faculty from doing the kinds of things that society really needed.
What kind of barriers particularly?
Oh, particularly the reward system, the tenure promotion process, which encourages people to do reductionist kind of activity, viewing the world through a pea shooter, if you will, so that you understand a very, very small segment of reality very, very well. There's a saying about specialization, that it's the process of learning more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing in the extreme. Well, we have been well served by that model in terms of unpacking the component parts of nature and of society. But what the world needs in terms of solving problems is a more integrative approach, where we take the findings of all these components and put them together in a systems perspective, which helps us to understand the workings of the various components.
Time for more of a synthesis.
Yes, it is a time for more of a synthesis, and I certainly found that in regard to the rural development work, and I found it true subsequently in other areas. After doing this study, I had done about 10 years of policy work on poverty and rural development and so forth, and at that time I really felt that it was time to make a career change. There were a lot of other factors operating in my life at that time, but I said, wait a minute now. Do I really want to spend the rest of my career doing policy research?